1506 December 9, 2025 right now marks 1,758 hours of progress in the global heart simulation. Currently, it's been figured out how to do post-processing with a stencil, and the current effect is to color an object blue, which by itself isn't interesting, though the interesting part is that normally post-processing applies to all pixels within the camera view. So as an example of that, the actual feature that controls it can be changed a bit, and so this is what normal post-processing looks like as it runs on all the pixels, but this effect allows it to, using a stencil, only apply to the object that has that stencil value on it. And the interesting part about this is that the stencil value is actually sort of injected into the object, and so the way this works is that there's basically a render object that has a reference to a material, and what that material does is basically replace or inject the stencil value into the object, so it overrides the material, but it doesn't actually replace the object's material, as the object can still have the lighting and all of the other properties that it has. And as an example of that, it doesn't actually override the texture either, so it only appears to inject the stencil value there. And the reason this is interesting is because by itself, having a shader effect on multiple objects, that can be done just using a normal material, but what normal materials don't really seem to handle is an effect wherein depth needs to be handled. So in this sort of example, there's a field of view effect which sort of highlights the pixels on objects within the field of view, but currently the issue is because this is running on a material per object, one object doesn't really know when it should be occluded or when its pixels should be occluded, and so the intention going forward is to figure out a way to do that, wherein sort of pixels that should be not highlighted are not highlighted, such as the pixels on the back, as they should be blocked ideally, and pixels on this object should be blocked as they're not in view, or they shouldn't be in view. And the part about where post-processing comes in is that these objects don't really know about the depth information of the scene on their own, but the full screen shader does know that sort of data, and so the idea is to create a post-processing effect that sort of does the same thing but takes into account the depth information, and does that in a way where it is possible to do so without having to write an entire custom render pass or delve into the low-level shader code for this feature.